Why don't you go ahead and, okay, we're gonna call this the meeting, short-term rental committee meeting to order at 7:02. Members present is Robert Tibble, Wayne Wilson and Marie, and I'm like, God, wow, I just drew
No
a complete
problem.
freeze bag on your last name.
Vladikova.
Thank you. Mine, not brain freeze.
I, somewhere or other I can pronounce. I haven't had a problem.
Should we vote to dispense with the reading because we don't have enough members present? Do we need to vote on that? Okay, we'll dispense with the reading of the previous minutes and voting on it due to the fact that we don't have enough members here at this meeting to constitute a quorum to vote on the previous
Who
meeting.
would attend this last meeting, sure.
Okay, so let's attempt to pick up where we left off. When we left the meeting, gave ourselves the task of let's work on zoning bylaws and how they're going to affect the short-term rental uses. Anyone want to jump in? As far as making a recommendation, or do you want to kind of start off at the beginning? We can do that too. I mean, I think one of the things we obviously need to do, if you're looking at the zoning bylaws, one of the first sections we come on to is definitions. Obviously, we need a definition for short-term rental.
We can work on this if you want.
No, let's see, we can try, but anyway, if we're gonna put a definition, in our zoning bylaw, I think the definition that we put in should be the same one that the state uses, so there'll be no confusion
I agree.
as to,
Yeah, I agree.
are we trying to mean something different than someone else?
Right.
I think it would only make sense that the state definition is the definition that gets put in there.
And that, it's pretty much where that's the right hand column.
Yeah.
It's there are made suggestions, and that suggestion is in is the second one down.
Right. So. Again, I'm not sure if we need to actually put forth motions here in order to get some of this stuff done, but.
Maybe we do. I mean, state definition should be no problem, right?
I shouldn't think so,
All right.
right? So when we get into, I've just printed for my own. I didn't want to bring the whole complete set of zoning bylaws with me, so I printed up a couple pages. Right, so we get into section 4, it's the use regulations.
Mhm.
That's the area that we're diving into.
Mhm.
All right, so. We've got purpose and intent, the application, existing buildings and land and uses subject to other regulations. Then part of that starts off as uses permitted by right or by special permit shall be subject in addition to use regulations to all other provisions of the bylaw and other applicable statutes, regulations, and bylaws. Pretty broad language. But part of that language would also tell us that the regulations that we've been working on here would be, it's telling us that it's okay to have regulations that are not necessarily within the bylaw itself.
Sure, and I think you see that
Right.
in marijuana additions that went in a year or so ago.
Something to that,
Yeah.
right?
Discussion about what can and can't happen.
Exactly. All right, so that's section 4.04. 4.05 is trailers, mobile homes, and boats. I don't think we need to get involved in that. Unless we want to put in something in that section about boats and such not being allowed to be a short-term rental.
I actually, on the last page of what I was handed out.
Go ahead.
Suggestion of kind of all we'd like to talk about. Last page, last item.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's the whole question of the accessory unit, right?
Well, that's a different question because I'm just kind of staying on where I'm at here. This
No, I
this
know what
section
you're
of the
saying,
zoning
yeah.
bylaw is referred to trailers, mobile homes and boats.
Uh,
And the question that I'm putting out here is that within our conversation of short-term rental, would we propose to make any changes to that section? Something to the effect of, you know, boats can't be used as a.
yeah,
well,
yeah, I actually
Or do
agree
we-
with that.
Or do we include that in the other regulations that we're gonna? We need to go into it like individual sections of every bylaw. Well,
Yeah, maybe we can keep it in the short-term rental like regulations or bylaws, right?
Yeah, I don't know if the planning board is going to take this and shuffle them around as far as where they fall, and stuff like that as far as the overall scheme of things. I don't know how that works.
and yeah, and I don't, at this point, we don't.
Yeah, we can certainly leave it, or we can expand on it, and as you suggested, as far as one or the other, I really don't have an opinion on it. But I do like some of this language here as far as it shouldn't be an accessory dwelling unit, so to speak. Because we've got that coming down the road.
Right, I mean, we don't have the facilities here in town that someone might use to make a boat into a short-term rental like they do in Boston. They're definitely out there, I've seen them,
Oh, yeah, they exist.
you know, oh yeah, rent my boat,
Mhm.
you know, whatever, but.
There is actually something in the bylaws here about a boat being allowed during the season as far as for dwelling. I can't remember exactly where it is. It wasn't something that I was really familiar with, but there is a comment here.
It says, yeah, except that a boat in the water may be used as a seasonal dwelling during summer
There
months,
you go. I don't know. if
Right,
we've got open-
but that's a dwelling.
A dwelling, yeah, yeah, but can we turn that dwelling into?
Well, that's why I'm asking, should, you know.
Yeah, you
is
should actually
You know what I
include
mean?
it in
Is
this
this the
section.
place, is this the
Yeah.
place where we put in another line in there that says something to the effect that. Not, you know, the short-term rental is not gonna be allowed in that situation.
I actually think it's a good place for it. If you can say that seasonally you can live on a boat, I would say you can't have
And
short-term
again, we don't-
rentals on a boat.
I don't know of anyone that lives on a boat within the town.
Yeah. that is-
Yeah, neither do I, but I guess.
Well, I mean, theoretically, somebody could have a boat on a mooring in
Yeah.
town and live on it.
Yeah, for a
And just
couple
row
weeks,
their boat
couple
back and
months,
forth to
whatever,
the
yeah,
wharf, right? I mean, it's theoretically possible.
theoretically.
My first choice, but I can see people doing it.
All right. So I think we should definitely, maybe we should put something in there.
So, okay, so we're gonna touch base. Which one is that one again?
That's 4.05.
4.05. So what am I writing here as far as just for future consideration or?
Let's, for your notes, let's put in possibly adding a provision to exclude boats.
Mobile homes and campers, right?
Yes. I think we should probably add all of them in,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and we can. I think there's already an exclusion as far as using a camper or a trailer or anything like that, as far as if it's parked in somebody's yard. I don't think you're allowed to do that as a.
Well, again, you've got different situations, right? So someone driving a camper across the country and they stop and park in your driveway for a couple of weeks, no one's gonna complain about that.
No.
If you buy a trailer and park it in your driveway and rent it to someone to live in, that's a different issue, right?
Sure. Yeah. So that's boats, trailers and tents,
yeah,
tents.
Absolutely.
Equipment, et cetera.
trailers and campers. And
Campers.
mobile homes or whatever they're called.
Right. Let's move to 4.06. 4.06 is the renting of rooms, so room is the largest. I'm not sure we want to even get involved in this one. We've been instructed that this not. STRs, I'm still, we can go over and over this.
I remember vividly that it was. Back in 2013, but.
I'm with you on that. But the question is, do we think we need to make changes to this section of the zoning bylaw? Specifically
No.
to address STRs? Because if somebody wants to rent a room to someone on a regular basis, we were never gonna tell someone they couldn't do that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, within the scope of this section.
They've always been allowed, obviously, for up to 2 rooms.
So can you just read this section again?
Yeah,
so
let me
we
read.
kind of-
Renting of rooms, and then it has lodging units in parentheses, in a dwelling unit for the use of not more than 2 roomers or lodgers.
Mhm.
Who do not constitute a housekeeping unit separate from that of the resident family. Is permitted in a residential or business district, provided that at least 1 off-street parking space is provided for each such roomer. Rooms rented to roomers or lodgers shall not have private outside entryways or separate cooking facilities. Roomers must use cooking facilities of the resident family. End of section.
And is there a definition of what constitutes a roomer or a lodger?
That seems to be the problem. with that.
Problem, right? So it's somebody just like a roommate for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I can see that that's different than somebody renting for like.
Historically, that's been a more of a long-term situation where people were working in the area, looking for jobs or whatever, that's where it comes from, and it's carried forward. But just to give you a little bit of history, that back in 2013, I had a complaint regarding a short-term rental, and in that case, the person was living at the house and renting rooms through Airbnb. And the planning board decided that this provision was sufficient to cover what was occurring at that time. And as far as I know, that's the only time where there's been an opinion from the planning board as far as approving short-term rentals.
You're correct, as far as I
You were there.
never seen, I'm saying I don't have it, there hasn't been anything since then.
Yeah, no.
There hasn't been a discussion of the matter.
Yeah.
Since then.
So maybe what we want to do is to suggest that somebody defines what constitutes roomer or
Well,
lodger.
maybe we need to change the words rumor and lodger,
Yeah.
because that seems to be the part that gets us in
Mhm.
trouble.
Well-
What is a rumor or a lodger, and is there a time frame that associated with rumor and lodger? I've always referenced it as a long-term tenant.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so is
But-
the
but,
courts.
you know-
The, I don't know if we want to touch this, because this is a totally separate thing. mean,
I agree.
People can still do that if they want.
Oh, right, oh, no, that's what I'm saying, this is still a completely legitimate
Yeah,
use.
so what we would be doing from a short-term rental side would be taking something similar to that, maybe. And just targeting short-term rentals.
or maybe if you actually define the short-term rental, then by default, this is something else, right? And long-term kind of
Yeah.
relationships, so, okay.
I mean, certainly we could theoretically add a line in here that says this use as defined above is not a short-term rental. Doesn't, you know what I
For
mean?
clarification.
Just for
Yeah, mhm,
clarification
yeah.
purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then somebody brought the country club. Do you guys know what they do in terms of like short-term rentals, rumors? I don't know what, like, I have no.
I don't know what the policy is there. I know they have
information on it.
they have a boarding house
Mhm.
license.
So
And they have- I'm not even, I don't remember the number of units. It's probably like a dozen. And it's literally,
Ever heard that many up there? I didn't know.
I believe so.
And so do they do like nightly rentals or monthly or what is it?
I believe they actually pay on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
And I think that might only be for the preference of the.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't
landlord,
know.
just know what I'm saying, as opposed to,
Because somebody
I don't
brought
know.
that up during these conversations, and I meant to ask you, because I don't know anything about it other than that they do events, so.
Yeah, I don't know how many units there are.
Mhm.
It's typically been a long-term situation.
Oh.
It would be a single person typically
Mhm.
that was wanted to stay in the hunt, continue to live in the
Mhm.
hunt, but didn't need a house or
Yeah,
didn't have a
okay.
house or whatever.
So maybe that's the rumors and lodges people were thinking about when they included that in the zoning,
Yeah, I think
right?
it works both ways, except that the rumors and lies.
Let's put this, I don't know of anyone that went to the country club for a day or two or a week or
Mhm.
two. It's
Yeah,
long term.
they moved up there for, yeah, everybody that I've known who's lived up there for months, if not years.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's move to section 4.07, customary home occupations.
Okay, so we're just a double.
All right, go ahead.
We're not doing anything there, other than possibly clarifying it.
Well, let's put it down as possible, trying to think of the word to use, but
Clarifying language or something.
just something to distinguish it, that
Mhm.
this is not considered a short-term rental, this situation,
Not SDR. Okay.
right? Maybe we need to add something there that clarifies that. Okay, so let's go to 07, customary home occupations. So you have a whole list here. The following home occupations, see definition, shall be permitted in a residential or business district, subject to the requirements of section 4.12A. And then we have this list is home occupations as a matter of right. Use of not more than 25% of the gross floor area of a dwelling unit for the professional office of a doctor, dentist, lawyer, architect, engineer, accountant, artist, computer programmer, or similar professional. Provided that not more than 3 persons, including any employees, are engaged in such activity on the premises, and further provided that off-street parking shall be provided in accordance with section 6 hereof, and further provided that said doctor, dentist, lawyer, architect, engineer, accountant, or similar professional person make his or her home and reside in said building dwelling.
I don't see.
Right, pretty clear. There's no need to change any of that. These are the uses as a matter of right. And so then we go to the next section. Upon issuance of a special permit by the Board of Appeals, use of not more than 2 rooms, 1/3 of the gross floor area of a dwelling unit for a customary home occupation, including professional office, beauty parlor, teaching of not more than 3 pupils simultaneously, dressmaking, the repairing of small goods for the office of a builder, contractor, plumber, electrician, real estate agent, or insurance agent, provided that not more than 3 persons, including any employees, are engaged in such activities. There's something.
On the premises.
No, I'm flipping pages here, but I'm not, I think I lost
Out of
something.
order?
Anyway, it's essentially on the premises. Right, so those are the different possible accessory uses that are subject to a special permit. So this would be, in my thought, is that this is the area that the use of a property as a short-term rental would be included,
As far as.
it's accessory use. It's considered an accessory use,
Oh, absolutely, as far, yeah.
right?
That's what we decide that it is, right? We had a conversation whether it.
Well, we
Needs
also
to
have
be
a
there.
different section
Yeah.
titled accessory
Mhm.
uses, right? So let me hit that for, and then we can go back and forth. So section 4.12 is accessory uses. Right, so the general requirements is section A, number 1. An accessory use shall be permitted only on the same lot as the building or use to which it is accessory, except as provided in section 6. No accessory use shall be located within the required front, side, or rear yards set forth in the table of dimensional requirements. Number 3, within any districts, structures and uses of the land customarily accessory to the principal use shall be permitted within the limits described in this section. A dwelling shall be permitted as an accessory use to a business establishment upon issuance of a special permit. Number 4, in any district, the total area of accessory uses to the principal use shall not occupy more than 1/3 of the gross floor area of all buildings on a lot and not more than 15% of the total area of the lot. Number 5, in any district, uses which are accessory to activities permitted as a matter of right and which are necessary in connection with scientific research or scientific development or related production, whether or not on the same parcel as activities permitted as a matter of right, may be permitted upon the issuance of a special permit, provided the Board of Appeals finds that the proposed use does not substantially derogate from the public good. Number 6, antennas and satellite dish antennas. Antennas and satellite dish antennas are permitted in residential, business, and public districts. Regular antennas shall not exceed a height of 45 feet from the ground. Satellite dish antennas shall be ground mounted only and must comply with the dimensional regulations of the district where located and shall be screened at their base to a height of 8 feet by fencing or plant material. In areas accessible to the public, security fencing shall also be provided. Number 7, accessory outdoor storage and display. Outdoor storage and display accessory to a business use next to a residential district shall not be permitted within 15 feet of the district boundary.
So I think our thing kicks in on,
There's nothing in that section A that really relates to it specifically.
section B, I think is where we.
All right, so let's go to section B.
A little bit.
Residential and business districts. The following accessory uses and/or buildings shall be permitted in residential and business districts. Renting of rooms and lodges, renting of rooms to roomers or lodgers. See section 4.06. Number 2, home occupation as defined in section 2 definitions. Number 3, private swimming pool provided that it conforms with section 4.09. Number 4, garage for parking non-commercial vehicles. Number 5, storage shed not exceeding 80 square feet in the area or 8 feet in height. Number 6, storage of boats, boat cradles, and other equipment accessory thereto, and further said boats and equipment may be stored inside and outside buildings, provided the fire chief is notified in writing prior to such storage. And 7, provision of lodgings in a dwelling unit to one or more domestic servants actually employed as such on the premises by the resident family, 35 or more hours each week. Excuse me. So that's the list. Those are accessory uses in well, it's in residential and business districts, so that's all the districts in all districts.
It currently exists. So we would make an addition there.
I think we have no choice.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way we can, right?
Now, short-term rental, it meets all the guidelines that you previously mentioned. 1/3 of the floor to area ratio, whatever it was, and
Well, we'd have to go through that.
You know, house by house basis.
So, okay, so just that I understand it, you wanna put it in this section? Or do you wanna create a new section? It's like section C, for example.
That's certainly possible. Well, we have a section C. I just have.
Yeah, or,
It's
you know, yeah.
irrelevant to this conversation, but this.
But you
certainly-
could also create a brand new section called short-term rentals.
We could.
And it could be included there. Right?
I don't see why not. We could make a section D because we have the C
Yeah,
and then just start right off with short-term rental,
yep.
right?
Mhm.
And then there could be any number of sentences after that.
Yep.
That includes what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Yep.
Right, so
Or
let's,
we could do that all in one place, and each, like under section C would be a reference, or section D. Go to short-term, section D, short-term rental, go to 4.1 whatever. For short-term rentals, and have everything listed in one section, so you're not jumping around between all these.
that's true, we could do
Different
that.
categories.
Yeah,
So it literally, I'm sure it's just me, but it's confusing to me that they talk, that this talks about the roomers and lodgers. Well before it comes up and announces that it's an accessory use.
Well, yes, you'd have to probably go back a ways to find out why some of the stuff is like renting of rooms and lodges is 4.06. And then we discuss it again in 4.12.
Exactly.
I don't,
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
I don't understand why we do that. And how it came that way.
And that's, I guess, that's my point, is saying we can avoid that if we just put everything like they did again, the marijuana statute, it's all in one place.
Yeah.
And if you.
I don't have a
you wanna
problem with
refer
that.
to it in other sections, and just like actually under roomers and lodgers. It appears in a number of places, and it just says, go to 4.06. Even the definition of roomers and lodgers, go to 4.1, yeah, so.
no, it makes sense, and it should be right after the roomers and lodgers, so you kind of distinguish one from the other.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time if it's a two-family and you're renting a unit out as a short-term rental and it's gonna be labeled as an accessory use for a short-term rental. That would be the primary use of that unit, though. Or if someone's renting out a single-family house. They're renting out the house itself, so. The house still is a primary residence, but then within the same confinements.
The house-
Accessory use.
In that situation, I think, Steve, that the two-family house is owned by individual A, who lives in unit A. And the ability for that person, I mean, basically that the house is his residence. That's the primary use, and then the adjacent unit can be rented out as a short-term rental as an accessory use. But the primary is still the owner's home.
What if they rented both units?
They can't, because you gotta have you would have as an accessory use. The primary use has to be residential. It has to have the owner living in that unit. And then as an accessory use, it moves over, and that's what the other unit would be considered, would be accessory use.
So by calling these an accessory use would mean the owner had to live in the building.
Yeah, and that's what we see throughout the existing bylaws, as anything that's under accessory use always refers back to the owner. Even as far as the home-based business, the owner has to live in the building.
But what about long-term rentals, when people rent whole house, the owner doesn't live in that house, it's a long-term rental.
Talking about short term.
Right,
Yeah, but you said that this is what you see through, like, those kind of uses, right? So is a long-term rental an accessory use, or is it right off
no,
the
I
rent?
just, I don't.
How is this
agree.
covered in the zoning regulation?
it's not,
Yeah.
it's not covered at all.
Mhm.
The rental of a house, it's not covered in any, it's not a zoning issue.
So, all right, so what we're saying is that because short-term rentals are considered a business, but long-term rentals are not considered a business. You want to put it in the accessory use. As opposed to, right, because we just said that a lot of these uses are in addition to a home use. So how is a long-term rental not a business use? When the only reason people rent somebody's house on a long-term basis is to make money. So to me, it's almost like the same way as opposed to calling one use a business use and another use not a business use just because it's longer than 30 days.
But it has to, at least from what I've learned, it has to do with the IRS view as to whether or not it's active or passive income.
I can clarify that if you want. They're both the exact same. They're both short-term capital.
Mhm.
They're both exactly the same.
But through the eyes of the IRS, they're saying that if it's a long-term rental, there isn't a whole lot of involvement as far as landlord is concerned. You're basically collecting the rents, you're getting a tenant in there, they're bringing in all their own furniture, that sort of thing. They're staying for a long period of time. There isn't a heck of a lot of going on as far as daily events involving the tenants. Whereas short-term rentals are considered active income, and that has everything to do with the fact that you're advertising the rental, you're booking the room out or the unit out on a 2 or 3 day basis, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. You're in there changing the linens. No, you own the furniture, you're maintaining the interior of the property. It's far more active participation by the owner of that unit, I should say the licensed person. And that, again, that I'm just quoting the IRS. And how
Well, I
they-
don't want to get this into a tax discussion. It has nothing to do with it. I mean,
Yeah,
you pay your taxes and how you declare these taxes should not have any bearing on whether somebody's zoning use is an accessory use or not. And so, you know, I mean,
what I was told, if you have. Mr. Smith has building A and building B, and building A is a short term and building B is a long term. It's the exact same. You have your hard costs, your mortgages, all that stuff, any common utilities. In the case of a short term, it's all the utilities. Whatever you pay are your costs, whatever you take in as your revenue, whatever your maintenance fees and whatever that, and they're both the exact same tax base. There's no difference at all.
yeah, but.
I can
yeah,
see an accessory use if you live in the house and you're gonna rent out a room. Now, you're living in the house, it's a primary residence, but you're renting out a room. I could see an accessory use for that use, but I couldn't see if you buy a 2-family house as an investment property, the nature of it is to rent it out. So is all that, if we classify it as an accessory use, is all that does is blanket discriminates against. It's just a backdoor way of making it owner.
Well, I think
No,
that's what it is.
Because we have these, remember, now, go back to the original stuff that we started off with. We have owner, operator occupied short-term rental, and we have operator adjacent short-term rental. We haven't abandoned that.
Yeah, but what does
So-
it mean owner adjacent?
Owner adjacent, short-term rental of a dwelling unit that is not the primary residence of the operator, but is located within a residential building with a total, well, in this definition that we had written in here, with a total of 4 or fewer dwelling units, where all dwelling units in the building are owned by the operator. So that's a 2-family one someone lives in, one they rent.
And yeah, I think we're all on this board and we'll all vote on
Yeah.
these things differently, but I never. Said, that sounds great, let's do it. Owner-
Well, we haven't had a vote on anything yet, that we've only just been having conversations, but I mean, there's different classifications of short-term rental,
Right,
right? And the owner occupied is exactly what we,
the.
How it all started.
Occupied one is struck.
owner occupied short-term rental is a short-term rental of a dwelling unit of no more than 3 individual bedrooms within a dwelling unit, that is the primary residence of its operator. This is one of the definitions we were working with
Right.
earlier, right? So obviously we understand what that is. Someone wants to rent out some rooms in their house.
Right. Yeah, so you got owner adjacent, owner occupied, owner, whatever, non-owner occupied is struck out. Did we?
Yeah, we
as a
never
committee
voted
at some
on it,
point
so,
decide-
Well, we haven't voted on 8, right?
right. So I think that actually would not be a bad idea to make a decision on, because if you put it in this section of the zoning regulations, as Steve just said, it's pretty clear that single-family houses cannot be rented, and you can't rent a full apartment, multifamily house. Every apartment cannot be rented according to this section. So is that what we actually decided we should recommend, or? gotta start making decisions, because otherwise we'll be going around in circles and, we'll never make a decision on it. So that would be,
We all have different opinions here.
that's right,
I think we're tasked with creating draft bylaws, not
That's exactly what we're trying.
restrictions, yeah, votes and stuff like that, but. I don't know. The purpose of creating draft bylaws, it's also to try to box in who can and cannot rent. I don't.
That's what bylaws do. That's the definition of a bylaw. That's what a bylaw is. Bylaw regulates the use of property. That's exactly what it is. That's,
But that's not a customary, non-owner occupied is not a customary. Anywhere, that would eliminate, I don't even know, we should probably do stats on that. That'd probably eliminate 80% of the Airbnbs.
I
Yeah.
don't, what do you, I run
I
that by,
would agree with that,
I don't
yeah.
understand what you mean.
That would eliminate 80% of, it if we said non-owner occupied, probably more, I bet you 90.
yeah.
So you're
I
telling me
see
that
that.
90% of the Airbnbs in town are not owner occupied?
I think so.
Well, yeah, you have a lot of single family houses, right, that have been rented out, and
I
then.
don't think so. I think you're wrong.
I'm not shooting from the hip, but I'm not, that's
Yeah.
why I said we should
We can
run.
take a look at it for next time for
Yeah.
sure,
I'm
but
wrong.
then the other thing is. We need to start voting on these things and move on. When we started on the committee. Somebody asked during the first meeting and Tony said that the purpose is to create reasonable bylaws or regulations and not to restrict anything, right? So that's the statement that he made. And so if we decide that for reasons that we can discuss, we shouldn't be allowing single-family houses to be rented out as short-term rentals, and we shouldn't be allowing anything other than accessory use, then let's talk about it, take a vote on it, and move on. Because otherwise, we'll spend a couple more months just, running around in circles and trying to insert it in some section of the zoning bylaws, but this is the real question that I think people really need to start making
Yeah.
decisions on.
When we got a heavy influx last week at the planning board of the speakers and all that. My takeaway was. Everybody there. Majority, a lot of hosts spoke, but the majority of folks, and it was the first time I've seen any alignment in this process thus far. All came together and said, we just need rules, we need some rules, like where people park, and how many people are allowed. Every single complaint stemmed from something a rule could address. I think there's folks in town that rightfully so have an issue with an Airbnb. I'd be interested to ask them if the issues you've had were rectified in the form of a bylaw or regulation, would you still have an issue with them? There's gonna be some people that have an issue with anything regardless. Everybody's opinion matters, everybody's voice matters, but there's a lot of people in town that utilize them too. There's a lot of people in town that voted to collect a tax from them. In my opinion, somewhat acknowledging the fact that they exist.
But
and they'll continue to
Yeah, but the issue we're trying to rectify is right now, our zoning bylaw does not address short-term rentals in any way, shape, or form. So we have to if we're gonna recognize them, well, then we have to change the zoning bylaw to make that happen.
Right,
And again, the planning board has only ruled on this once. And it had to do with accessory use of an owner occupied household that was renting
Yeah.
homes. That's the only time the planning board has taken a position on this. These empty houses, they've never been addressed. They're not in our table of use. They just appear out of nowhere. So
what do you mean by just?
It wasn't an issue that was discussed back in 2013.
Yeah.
Topic of discussion at the time was an owner occupied dwelling.
that's the
So
only time-
no, the concept of a non-owner occupied dwelling was never discussed.
It was never discussed one way or another, though. Are you saying for the vote for to collect the taxes?
No, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Vote to collect taxes has absolutely nothing to do with it.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was just
I was
asking.
talking about the planning board vote. That was addressing a specific issue about a house that was or was not in compliance with section, whatever the hell.
How is it? zoning bylaw, it was decided that it was allowed through 4.06. That was the only rule, that is the
Right.
only rule.
That was the only vote that was ever taken.
Yeah, okay, but hold on. So didn't we get copied on a request from somebody that requested a official complaints about short-term rentals from the town, right? The town, no, hold on. So that was about a property on Pleasant Street or something, I
Yes.
can't remember. And so the town officially responded and said that because short-term rentals are not prohibited, they're in fact by default allowed. That's, if you actually read that, why don't you go back and read it? And that the town is looking into that. So
Well,
that was an official response. Didn't it come from?
didn't come from my office,
I
because
thought it was-
the office is exactly the opposite,
Mr. Chair, I think that's inaccurate.
exactly the opposite of that.
Oh, there's,
Came from Dan.
okay,
Yeah, that's not what the issue, you're talking about the house right behind Town Hall there?
I can't remember what it is. I
Yeah.
can look that issue up.
Yeah,
I
that was
don't
not a
think-
short-term rental issue at all, had nothing to do with short-term rentals.
No, it has to deal
No,
with
he was-
a short-term rental that a owner was renting his house as a wedding venue or something like that.
That's the
And
house.
That was an Airbnb.
yeah, that is an Airbnb. Somebody complained about the fact that it was rented for a wedding. And then they also complained about the short-term rentals.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
the
re-
house we're talking about.
Yeah, but they said.
Yeah, I'll
they
have
said
to look
was
it
a
up.
Hotel, and you said it wasn't a hotel.
That's right. And
That had nothing to do with short-term rentals. I wrote the letter. Trust me.
Nothing to do with
Had
short-term
nothing to do with
rentals.
Short-term rentals, nothing at all. It turned
Oh,
on
okay.
a place of assembly.
You got me confused now.
Yeah, we turned on a place of assembly because he was advertising, renting out for weddings. And we said, no, that becomes a place of assembly. You can't do that in a residential district, so find something else, so to speak. So that had nothing to do with short-term rentals.
Yeah, but-
Yeah,
and
that's
again,
probably-
just to clarify, I don't think there's been any rulings of anything. I don't think there's anything we can go back and say, well, this is what we decided back.
Okay,
then.
so yeah, this was a complaint from a neighbor relative to the Pleasant Street address.
Yeah,
And in this, the complainant was complaining about the fact that it was being used as a hotel or a motel. It was being used as a restaurant, it was being used as a catering establishment,
mhm,
all of which were valid complaints.
Yep.
It doesn't
Yeah,
really
take a look.
address, it doesn't really address this specific issue here.
And as far as your last thought, Steve. Planning board has ruled on this. I was there, Wayne was there, it was in 2013. And it had everything to do with allowing an owner occupied short-term rental to continue doing business under 4.6. That was the rules and laws.
That's right, that was their decision,
yeah. I'll take a
but
look at it
that
again.
was before the non-owner occupied users were even thought of. No.
At that point.
No, I agree. So again, there's something new on a daily basis here.
Right.
Right?
But I don't think that has any bearing on what we're doing now.
I think it has everything to do with what we're doing now.
Well-
Either we're gonna create a zoning bylaw that either regulates it, doesn't allow it, allows it. I mean, otherwise, we're just gonna be in this mystery area of we're not doing anything. Either we have to recognize it as a use. Either it's gonna be a use as a matter of right, or it's gonna be a special permit use,
Or
or some other.
it would be a
Regulation.
principal use, in which case the table of use would have to be updated. But
Well, I think it
So-
needs to be updated regardless.
as far as principal use, well.
If it's gonna be allowed as a principal use, then it needs to be added to the table of use regulation.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying is that if we were going in that direction, that's something that would need to be updated. But I don't know if we're going in that direction or not. I know I'm not.
I know you don't want to.
We're planning to update the zoning regulations anyway.
But not the table,
So-
not the principal table of use, that's what I'm talking about, the accessory use, as far as the list of accessory uses that are approved. Yeah, absolutely, that has to be updated.
That's the decision we have to make.
But not the principal table
Yeah.
of use that we're talking about.
No, I get it, but I think that's kind of the decision we have to start with, because otherwise you just feel like not making decisions on the most important piece of this whole.
My thought is you can. Like when we started, Wayne, I feel like your mission was spot on. If it's a safe, habitable space, rent it wherever you want. You know, but let's write some rules and regulations, or sorry, Dan, bylaws for what can be rented. Tents, boats, RVs, sheds, all out the window, tree houses. If you have a actual space that meets egress, that meets everything, rent it however you want. You want to rent it as a short-term rental. These are the rules you have to go by. This is the license you have to obtain. If you break the rules X amount of times, you lose the right to rent it as that. But I don't know how we can, just because someone's renting something in a transient nature on a short-term basis, they're furnishing it, everything. But we can say that's totally different than renting it long-term. Because otherwise, I would think you'd have to say the same thing for a long-term rental.
And there
You'd have
are
to say-
furnished long-term rentals. I
Right.
mean,
Why is it in the building?
what building code?
Why does the building code treat these differently as far as short-term rentals versus a residential one or two family dwelling? They're saying that they're considered an R1, which would be a hotel, motel. As a result of that, they have different requirements from a safety standpoint. That's what the state says.
You said that last week. I mean, you make good points. Show me one Airbnb in the entire world that's had mandated to put sprinklers in it. So we could read it however we want.
So you're asking Wayne to ignore the safety requirements so that some people can make some money.
I don't think that's accurate. I don't think.
That's what you're saying.
Didn't
I
the
don't
council
think that's
say
relevant to the
last week that
conversation
this
we're
has
having
nothing to do with short-term rentals?
Sorry.
Wasn't there a conversation where the town's council said that this is not considered hotel, motel, or whatever, for the purposes of the.
Yeah,
There's a
Rob,
difference of opinion.
Transient was highlighted and a couple other keywords,
Yeah,
but
that was-
it stated that.
It was the building
It
code,
has to
Steve.
be-
You ever see it?
Yeah, I did it, yeah, I have my construction license. It had to be commercial, which would mean ADA compliant, grab rails by a toilet, a certain size, no stairs anywhere, elevators, ramps, sprinklers throughout the whole space,
That,
the same.
I consider this whole,
parameters
this building code thing to be a separate and distinctly different issue. If the state says that in order to have a multi-level short-term rental, you need an elevator, then that's, if they say that, then that's what you'll do,
Right,
right? But that, I don't think that is relevant to what the town wants to allow and not allow. I think let's try to keep the code separate from the bylaws.
yeah,
All right. So if the use of a building is going to be for short-term rentals, then it needs to be added to the list of the use of the table of use. I think it does. I don't see how you can be allowed without changing the definition.
I think it would clarify.
the only reason, and there's an argument you could have to this, but the only thing I think. There's a conflict is if you move out of your single family house, you can rent it. You can rent it furnished. You can rent it however you
I'm
want.
not saying you can or you can't.
The nature of these are different. That's the reason for bylaws. That's
The difference is, it's that it's going to be rented for less than 28 days. That's the difference. That's essentially the only difference here.
Right.
Yeah.
And through an advanced reservation platform.
Whatever, I mean, go to the definition, fine, and that's the difference, but it's a difference, a big difference.
Right,
All right, didn't know about it when it happened, but I've been made aware of a situation down on Willow Road where there was 100 people at one of these particular properties after a wedding.
oh, yeah,
All right,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
that's not acceptable to the neighbors.
No, I agree,
you know, I mean, that's
Yeah,
egregious,
that's why you need
Yeah.
rules.
exactly.
right? So you know, you probably get at least a half a dozen neighbors over there that would shut the whole thing, shooting match down if they could, if they can vote on it. They wouldn't allow any of it.
Right. But how I look at it is regardless, but. Anything that we can't fix with a rule or regulation, I see as problematic. If we're creating something that cannot be fixed. That's a problem. That's an absolute problem.
So then the question then will be, so your answer would be, don't change any zoning bylaws, just add a list of rules.
You're far better than that at myself, Wayne. I don't know the requirements. I figured there would be a whole short-term rental section that said, you must be licensed. You must be licensed with the state. You must carry this insurance. You must meet these minimum
But that's not a
qualifications.
zoning bylaw,
Then,
that's a regulation.
Yeah, and didn't we say?
or what if we called it what if it was a zoning bylaw? It was in the zoning bylaws.
I don't think we can do it that way.
Didn't Dan say we can? Dan, didn't you say that we can actually do it either way?
Yeah, you realize the difference between bylaws and regulations. Regulations really are the weeds, right? Are the trees, so to speak, and the bylaws are the forest. So to be caught up in the minutia of determining what type of insurance would just clog up the works in terms of creating progress. That's something you would typically leave to an agent, like a town body, whether it be a planning board or somebody in particular. But to just sort of wade through the weeds like that, you would just weigh down the entire process. A bylaw would authorize someone else to do that. Typically.
Mhm.
I mean, think of the IRS code, right? When you think of IRS, you don't really think of statutes in the federal code. You think of regulations. So that's the idea. Like the code, the federal law will give the IRS the power to create the regulations. Those are the ones you really look at. Think of it that way.
Again, I mean, so the gist of that is that we don't need to change every zoning bylaw we have to accommodate this,
Right.
Yeah,
which is what I thought we were doing weeks ago, months ago, was we were just gonna make a list of rules.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Yeah.
You're the chairman, so.
Well,
That's what I
that
thought
was
we were
my
doing, and
original
somebody
impression,
else can
and
figure out how
everyone
to.
keeps
Yeah,
saying it was supposed to be making recommendations
Long term,
for zoning bylaws. You
fortunately,
can't do both.
I don't know the legality of implementing rules long terms. I can tell you where I live now, there's a nightmare situation with a long-term tenant. And everyone shrugs their shoulders and says, we don't really know what to do with it. But if
That's
you
what the
want
housing-
short term, here's a list of rules and regulations you go by, and if you're out, you're out. You know, we strip your license, we fine you and shut them down. It gives people the opportunity or the right to utilize their property. We're not boxing in a situation. I would probably be in favor. I haven't personally, it's all my personal outlook. I haven't seen an influx of these. I haven't seen them taken over the town. I think they should be capped. You know.
Well, so let's go off on a slightly different tangent then. Right? If we're gonna say we're not gonna change zoning bylaws that regulates it as an accessory use. And we allow it as a primary use, right? Then we can list it in the table of use regulations. So then how do you go about capping the number? How do you work that? How do you decide that, you know, party A can have a short-term rental license and party B is not gonna get one?
I don't know how sorry, Ron.
Lottery.
Yeah, I don't know how that's what I was gonna say. I don't know how the process works, but once you hit
Well,
50 as a maximum, anybody else, it becomes a lottery system. If one gets forfeited, and that's another issue, like how does it get forfeited? Do they turn it in because someone will just say?
well,
no,
you have to renew it,
Maybe it becomes,
some kind of either an annual or biannual basis. So
but then that goes.
if you don't renew it, then that would open something up, but
And the other thing you can think about is some of the streets, right? So some people say, okay, 50% of houses on my street are now short-term rentals, right? So you can also say that only certain percentage of houses on the street can be short-term rentals, if that's important to the folks, right? So not that you say there are 50 short-term rentals in Nahant, but you can say, okay, we're gonna cap, let's say, maximum 30-40% of the houses on a given street can be short-term rentals. Right, so this way you don't have like a neighborhood that becomes either just short-term rental or,
So you could have districts only allowed, the business district, but then it changes the
that
changes the dynamic.
Where we have two little business
Yeah,
districts.
the town is, I think the town is a.
We're 90%.
So we kind of talked about it before.
And who knows, I mean, I've tried to do research, there are groups out there, they'll go in and they'll buy up 40 houses, they'll buy every single house as it comes available. And they'll live somewhere else and they'll have some management company that oversees 500 Airbnbs and 67 of them are in the town of Nahant. That's treacherous. I don't.
But that's not happening in Nahant. There are a number of properties sitting on the
It
market,
would be
right?
foolish for us to sit here and do all this
Yeah.
work and let it,
Don't
because the
forget-
unthinkable does happen. I haven't seen, I wrote a small report for the planning board. I tried to go back with every single, I've written down every concern I've heard, and I've said, based off the numbers, based off the last year we've had, real estate transactions, real estate boom, it hasn't gone haywire. It's less than 2% of the total residences available in Nahant, and 2% is based upon legal residences. There's probably another 400 illegal apartments in Nahant that we're not shining a light on. And also that 2% is comprised of, it's a small number, but people that live in the house and rent it out. So it's not changing that house. It's not taking a possible rental off the market. It's not doing anything aside from,
I think some of the slowdown in the commercialization of the Airbnb has got to do with the fact that the interest rates have gone up. So you don't have people out there, buying $1 million houses at 2% interest. So it's a lot more expensive.
I see it too. House prices have dropped. If you buy a building and you want to fix it up, you're probably not going to get a rent that's going to support it. If you want to fix it up nice, if
That's
you want to
right.
buy a house and fix it up and Airbnb it, you're going to have people start to say, we're having a wedding at the Ocean View, but God, this Airbnb is $700 a night. Let's just stay down the street for $250. I personally think the market will work this out, but I think that's a lot. You don't want to put the town and the residents at stake to just sit back and say, no, the market will work it out, but it's not, I don't know if it was this meeting of the planning board, someone was concerned with, how much their neighbor was making. And I said, from what I can see, you can go on any individual property on Airbnb and it links all the calendars. These places are booking up 40% occupancy. In the winter months, they're lucky if they're 10%. People aren't going to be scooping up properties in Nahant to rent them 10% of the time. But that doesn't alleviate problem, what we're here for, because a problem 10% of the time is still a problem.
60 years ago, the town was given the opportunity to buy the property up at East Point. It wasn't a problem as far as owning that property until the last 5 years. So this could be the next East Point issue for the town of Nahant. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, next year, or 5 years from now. Just saying, if you're looking at what's going on right now, you're only taking a glimpse of what it could potentially become. And I don't think that we're doing the town a favor by saying it isn't a problem right now.
No, that's what we're here for.
That's why we're doing the regulations, because these Airbnbs have been in town for 10 years.
And I think it is.
Okay, there have been no regulations, so it's easy for somebody to come in, buy a house and say, put up, Airbnb.
I
and
totally understand
nobody
that. That's exactly why we
anything.
wanted to be getting
Yeah.
into this.
Since we're the only community on the North Shore that's doing it, they're gonna come here first.
And so, so we're not saying no regulations, right? Nobody's saying that.
But
But-
I guess that my point is that we started off just talking about regulations.
Yeah,
And then we were instructed to go the bylaw direction. Make recommendations for bylaw changes. Are we gonna forego that and just go back where we were? And
who
on the
instructed us? I
regulation?
don't know.
Same place. Everything that we've looked at from other communities, as far as what they have in place, is what we've been working towards. I don't think we're off the mark here as far as the way we've been going. We have some big decisions that need to be made so that we can go to the next step as far as fine tuning some issues. We certainly have to do that. I don't think we're off target here.
I don't, it just seems to me that we're just running around in circles.
Yeah,
Because every time we
Simple.
discuss it, and almost everything we discuss, we turn back into this conversation about
Mhm.
what's gonna be an acceptable for as a short-term rental, or what isn't gonna be acceptable.
And that's where we need to have a vote and make the decision, but this isn't the time to take that vote. We need a full committee.
no, I agree with
I don't argue
that.
that point.
Yeah, no, I agree with
And
that.
it
but I
would be a
think,
shame too, if we make up bylaws and there's enough folks out there that say,
Well, anything that we do from between now and town meeting could go all straight to hell on the town hall floor.
right, but I
It
would
is-
think if we're writing bylaws. Again, when I took away from the planning board, people want rules and regulations. Accessory dwelling, owner occupied, wipes out 90% of it.
You know what? We've had
I
rules.
think that's what some people want to do.
I think the rules have been overlooked for a while now.
Right, we did have a
Now
rule.
making up
We've
more
been told
rules.
that we weren't allowed to use that rule.
Yeah,
I don't know. You guys are
We're talking about the rumors and lodges rule. We had a rule that says you can't have more than two people in your house, not related to you. And that's essentially been thrown in the trash. That was the rule.
Use, it says no hotels, motels, and it doesn't say anything about short-term rentals, which means that you default to it isn't approved. So either way.
I disagree, I disagree with that. I think rules, laws are written as society progresses. There's no laws right now saying you can't fly your car down the hot road because there's no flying cars. I'm sure when they make them, they're gonna make rules and speed limits and everything to go by. It's very out there to think, well, they didn't specify short-term rentals on a bylaw that was written in the 1960s. They didn't specify Uber drop-offs or Grubhub or any of that either. There was none of that allowed. That short beach gets inundated in the summer with Uber drop-off and folks drive up the sidewalk. I've seen them drive halfway down the ramp. They don't know any better. And, I think us as a community, we have to say this is a problem. We can't stop it, but we can definitely make a drop spot and we can do this, we could kind of adapt to the times, so to say. I think that's what this calls for, not just trying to read something from the 60s or 70s and
Yeah, but there's something that already exists. There's a bylaw here that already exists. So if we're gonna just ignore it, then we should recommend that it be changed. Because it doesn't make any sense to continue to ignore it.
yeah, I wish we were tasked with the whole zoning bylaws. Matter of fact, the planning board
No,
has it on the agenda.
That's the planning.
But yeah,
law
I
by
mean, look at the
definition.
table of uses, you can have a video store down the street, if you want to open a video store tomorrow, because there's a lot of people out there renting VHS tapes. That's an allowable use in the town of Nahant.
Well, yeah,
I don't know, let that go to show how out of date that is.
well, our bylaws haven't been changed since, well, this batch was updated in maybe 15. But the bulk of it, and that's only a few paragraphs.
Right.
The 90% of this was like 70s.
1990 was when they were really overhauled.
1990, all right.
Still a long
That's
time
the
ago.
latest time, right?
Yeah.
Blockbuster was still around.
Yeah,
I understand that, but that's the point is, the fact that it says that you can have a video store doesn't preclude someone from doing it.
Like the marijuana dispensary. Planning board's working on that, and we voted, and again, I'm not gonna go down that road. detail for detail, but because the town voted on that means we'd have to allow a shop. So the planning board is trying to come up with some type of rule for it.
It's already been written into the book.
Right. So the planning board shuffled to come up with a rule for it. It's almost the same as this. The town voted to adopt a tax. Now let's write some rules for it.
Well, it's an interesting discussion. I'm not sure we're accomplishing anything with this, but the bottom line is that for me anyway, if I wanted to take up a business that isn't approved, I would ask the town if I could have that approved. And I haven't seen that. So we are where we are, whether it's an old rule or too old rule. It wasn't an issue until we had the internet. And basically what that did as far as these platforms is concerned, is it found a way around the existing bylaws. So, or at least it did in some places. I mean, the bottom line is that again, it's not in the table of use as a principal use.
Right, it's not in this use, it's not in this list.
And as I said, if it were me and I wanted to do something like this and start a business in my home, or turn my home into a business, I would approach the town and say, this is what I'd like to do. Maybe get a petition together. Have the bylaw changed, or at least attempt to have the bylaw changed. But in this case, I haven't seen that. In fact, I'm not even sure how the building permits handle it, because I know there's a section on there for use change, and I don't know how many of those you get, Wayne, but
I haven't got one yet.
yeah, it's there's use change, and I don't see any of those boxes checked off. So I honestly don't know how this came about. But I think the town is slow in addressing it, and we're playing catch up. And unfortunately, it's just not how I would consider it fair as far as trying to approach the town and do this.
I think you brought up a great point, the internet. I think the internet shines a light on this. I think the governor a few years ago passing the tax law, he would have realized that there were short-term rentals if there wasn't a publicly traded company boasting the numbers of short-term rentals that they have and that they host, and boasting about their revenue. It shined a light on it. So I think the internet, if anything, probably helps make people realize that these are out there. To think that the town's never had them. I talked to a guy down by the golf course, and he was telling me about the Somerville houses, which I never even heard of before. And he said they were all families from Somerville that came in here just for the summer, and they rented them out by the week or the weekend. The house that I moved into, 5 years old in 1990 in town, it was a short-term rental at first, and it really looked it. And the gentleman, the landlord, said, this isn't really insulated well, and it had electric baseboard heat, but if you want to take it for the year, you can. Get some space heaters, I think it probably went on before, but there wasn't what we have now. There wasn't the availability to go online and look at it yourself. You knew Mrs. Smith and you rented her house every 4th of July for a week, and people came and people went. And I think the nature of Nahant has always been somewhat transient. And I would argue that fact, look at the population in the summer.
The ability to rent for up to 14 days has been in place for many, many years. There's no tax implications for it. And it's obviously addressing exactly what you just said, people coming for a visit. We've seen a letter from a local resident who rented his property off and on through the summer for 10 days. What we're doing has no impact on that. The 14 days is totally separate.
Okay, so hold on, I don't know about that, because some communities actually advise folks that there is a section in the state regulation that says if you're renting for 2 weeks a year, you have to pay taxes. But some communities recommend that you still are required to register with the state, and you're still required to go through the process. You just don't have to pay taxes, right? So that's something that may be good for them to confirm, but I wouldn't necessarily not say that that's excluded.
My point is that the ability to rent it wasn't considered a short-term rental, but the ability to rent one's home has been around for long before these short-term rentals issues came up. Yeah, Nahant had a lot of that. Nahant did, Rockport still does. Gloucester still does, but the bottom line is that that's not a short-term rental in the eyes of the state. So
That's not a reason to pay, to register and pay taxes, I think. I don't think I truthfully don't think the state cares what you do. I think they only care if it implicates them from getting hotels taxed. I don't think they say, if you're doing it under 14 days, you're a really good person, you have great people staying there, so you're all set. I think they're saying, if you're doing under 14 days, you're off our radar. If you find $300
Yeah.
around tomorrow, you don't have to claim it. If you win $300 in a scratch ticket, you don't have to claim it, but if you win 1,000, you do. It's not because you're more of a winner in one situation than the other. It's simply a number that the IRS of the state is willing to go after.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that, because if you chase everybody who rents for 2
And
weeks,
again, imagine if
nothing
every
gets
single
done.
house in Nahant
That's
did it in
right.
14 days.
Yeah, everybody
you
has
have
a
a much bigger problem than
Yeah,
if 39 units had
yeah.
a bunch of restrictions imposed on them.
And the
They could do
state
that by
allows
right.
it. I mean, state allows single family homes and apartments to be rented out.
Another circumventing way around the short-term rental, a unit furnished, rented for any period of time that's for business use is not a short-term rental. I don't know how you define that. Somebody comes there and they make a phone call for business, then they go to the beach for 5 days. Is that a business use? You know, I think there's wormholes in this from what I've read, and I think the only way to go at it is to say, look, I don't care if it's 2 days a year, 200 days, if they're conducting business or they're going to a wedding, someone's staying in your house. These are the rules they're going by. And if you drop the ball on that, I don't care how much you're paying taxes to the state, you're not doing it anymore.
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
All right, well,
Rules,
unfortunately, we haven't
enforcement,
made
and-
much progress here.
Yeah.
So now the question is, so do we want to add short-term rental to the table of use regulations or not? It's a simple question.
I would say yes. I would say it's added in the same fashion that a long-term rental is added, but again, there's, you know, I think that things to hash out are what is a violation and how many can you have before you lose it?
But that's
a two-part question.
Yeah, that's a big two. So it's one thing at a time. Do we? Are we gonna recommend that the short-term rentals be added to the use of regulations?
I think they should be for clarification. That's basically what Linfield did. And then they said we could have them. And that's what we. would be
Yeah, and
doing.
they probably have a lot more districts than we do. I mean, we've only got a total of. What is that, 6 here, and two of those is public and recreation, so. I mean, we have R2, R1, R2, B1, and B2.
Like you said, Wayne, it's a two-part question. If we were talking about, you know, fast order food establishment is down here, but it's N all the way across.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But for clarification, so that we don't have to defer to if it isn't listed, then it isn't allowed. We could list it and do whatever we want.
Okay.
As far as allowing.
So we should list it either way,
Yeah, that will help.
and then we
clarify.
can decide
Yeah.
where it's an N and where it's a P and where it's an S.
Exactly.
All right, I don't think we get to fight over that one. So, I mean, I suppose we can work with Dan to decide whether or not we want to work these regulations that we have already been working on into, do we include that as a part of the zoning bylaw, or do we just make it as a separate document? Because that, all the stuff that we've been looking at from different cities and towns have seemed to be handling it differently.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing we can sort out. I think it's really important to just come up with some basic rules to work from as a starting point. Adopt some of the definitions, take a vote on some of the difficult issues and move on. Otherwise, we'll be here for another year talking about.
And
the
then
same
maybe in a
thing.
year or 2 years, this committee or another like committee meets
Yeah.
and says, hey, are these rules working? You know, and if the town and majority says no,
That's right.
change them. You know,
Well, it's not quite that simple, because Quincy is our best example, I think, on that, in that they had allowed whole house rental in a district that they decided they didn't want to allow, and what does that generate? An awful lot of lawsuits. So the decision has to be right as far as that issue, right out of the box, or the town is gonna back it from into a situation that it doesn't want to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the town can be sued for any reason at any point, so you.
Yeah, and
We can get sued.
there's a lot of-
You can get sued, so
a
that's.
lot of
reality.
Avoid it, or at least not corner ourselves, paint ourselves into a corner. I think it's worth a try.
in. I didn't bring it up, it's in a totally non-argumentative way, I did call Revere last week, I talked to the short-term rental, they have their own hotline over there.
Mhm.
I talked to him in detail. To cut right to the mustard, you do not have to live in the house. You can have as many Airbnbs as you want, you have to be a resident of Revere, and I said, that's interesting, and he said, we're modifying it now, that if you have somebody in the city of Revere to go there, then to be an emergency contact. We're really having the people write an action plan, but that's in the progress, but right now, you don't have to live there and, you know, yada, yada, yada. He said pretty much private properties, you know. 1, 2, 3 families, fine. The residents can do with that. We do not allow them in any of the hotels down the apartment houses down the beach. He said one is that, you know, an apartment complex and the other is not. He said, so you have to live in the city of Revere. And you have a bunch of rules and stuff to go by.
Do you recall who you spoke with?
Yeah, the guy on the, right on the page.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting.
Throw my name out there, I was at the fire department, he said, are you at a Revere Fire Department right now? I said, I work here, and he laughed, and we had a pretty good conversation. I introduced myself as a member of the STRC, and just said, look, we're trying to create draft bylaws, I just want to know who can rent from you guys.
While you're looking, I'm just, I mean, I sent it out as far as the document for Revere.
It was
and-
ambiguous, though, if you read in the back and read the back in the question section and the common questions.
You know, it's interesting, like Rob mentioned, remember that article you mentioned about shooting at an Airbnb in Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know if you guys remember the article I sent to the committee. So I was kind of curious as to how the city reacted to that event, right? And so there was an article where they said that as a result of that situation,
Unless he has an assistant.
the city was adopting a new rule that if you're not a resident of the county, you have to appoint either a real estate agent or somebody who's licensed in property management to be the point of contact for these short-term rentals, so that the police and fire department can actually get in touch with somebody. And if the short-term rental is set up as a trust or some kind of legal entity, you need to disclose the name of the owner and name a local agent who will be the property manager that people can contact. So it's not like they said, oh, this is, you know, they, I guess, understood that these events, you know, can happen because people are people. So different reaction than Linfield, that they prohibited. These guys said, okay, let's implement some rules and local property management for these residents who are not residents. So that kind of goes with what you're saying in Revere. If you're not a resident, you have to have a local property manager
Yeah.
or whoever agent who's in charge.
In researching rules, I was sent to a page on Facebook, which I despise social media, and I apologize in advance for referencing it. It was Airbnb Superhost page. So I read through this page. I couldn't tell you how many people said it was all like Facebook, you know, boast and whatever. all these people boasting, I host 415 units, I host 700 units, and I'm thinking, what is this billionaire doing on Facebook boasting about this? Thinking, why is this guy taking his time to go on Facebook and proclaim, you know, he has 400 residential units that he Airbnbs? A big problem in other parts of the country is Airbnb arbitrage, they call it. Somebody calls Wayne and says, hey, Wayne, you got an apartment for rent, $1,200, you know, down on Nahant Road, I'd like to rent it. Great, you got it. They go in there and they set it all up, they throw cameras in and they Airbnb it. Pay Wayne his money every month. Wayne tries to say, no, that's against the rules. Good luck in housing court. You know, unless you had it in your rules from the get-go saying you can't do it, you're not gonna throw them out. And these people go out and just blanket rent apartments.
Mhm.
They buy $2,000 worth of furniture from big lots, they stuff it in there, and they just come up with a, you know, they hire a local cleaning company and they start clustering out their places. But there's people that'll have, pick any major city, they'll have 200 of them here, 200 of them over there, and they just connect the dots, send cleaners in, send maintenance guys in, hope they don't get any bad reviews and keep afloat. That's horrifying.
Yeah,
You know, that's big business. You know, that's, to me, and we all see things and do things differently. That's something to prevent against. But outside of that, I think that's kind of what Revere wanted from my conversation with them. And mostly there's a couple problematic buildings on Revere Beach, and there was certain people buying up a bunch of units, and they were, I think, started thinking, oh God, they're just gonna make themselves their own hotel over here. You know, they're gonna buy 40 units on the top floor and just go crazy. So I see it why that's why they ran that way. But yeah, that Airbnb arbitrage, I didn't know much about it before, but if you read on it, it is.
and so when you talk to the hotline in Revere, what is that hotline about? Is that a center where people can complain, or what is it? What is that about?
It's like the building office.
Okay.
It's like the building inspector's office. Oh, and that's all they handle.
Mhm.
And I, you know,
Did you talk to them if they have like real issues with noise, overcrowding?
yeah,
It's
it's
like
like,
crazy behavior, like,
yeah, and he was great. You know, he went into it. He said the Revere has a number of rules in place now that, you know, they don't amplify for a short-term rental. He said, but there's a lot of stuff now. You want to park on the street? Revere has 6 full-time, 24-hour-a-day parking enforcement. Nahant doesn't have that. Revere has a full-time trash compliancy department, which if your barrel lid is tipped up because you have a bag on top, they send you a ticket in the mail. Yeah, so they get you cornered in, and you know, there's not much you're gonna be able to do with that, but they also have rules.
Mhm.
They tell you, you know, however many people you can rent to, that's all the people that can be there. However many vehicles you can park, that's fine. If you can rent to 6 and you can only park 1, you better pray that they're carpooling. If not, if you put a car out in the street and we find out it's from you, that's a violation.
So for what it's worth, this comes right off of the Revere short-term rental website. As I said, I've circulated this already to everybody, but for the audience. City of Revere, Mass Public Hearing Notice, July 12th, 2021. 8.09.010 summary and purpose. Short-term rental for rental parties of no more than 6 renters shall be permitted in the city of Revere at a residential property that is owned by and contains the primary residence of the operator. So I'll talk to Mr. Cantanazzo's office this week and find out why we're getting a different story.
On the bottom, right on their active page now, revere.org, my primary address that I live at is outside the city of Revere, but I also own a property within Revere. Can I offer my Revere property as a short-term rental? No, the owner of a property being offered as a short-term rental must also reside in Revere as their primary residence. That's on there. I don't know if that was the bylaws they drafted. This is on there. current page now.
Okay, all right, so we're not getting a lot.
But yeah, we're not in Revere.
What can we
Right,
say?
so let's open this up to our audience. I see a hand in the middle of the screen.
I think that's you. I think that's your mouse.
I don't know what that is.
I.
Oh, is that not a raised hand?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
no.
okay, sorry. Okay.
We got one.
Yeah.
Scipio. Go ahead, Susan.
Susan, you're on mute right now.
Yep. Hi, good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. Two things. Wayne, I just, I sent you a copy of the presentation that I gave at the planning board
Mhm.
meeting earlier this week. I just want to let you know that we're still having problems and we are not allowed to communicate with the owner of the property. So I've been in touch with the chief of police and, you know, he has said that the issues that we've had should have gone through him in the beginning and should go through him from now on. So I guess that speaks to the issue of putting an extra burden on the police department into this argument. One other thing I wanted to mention that came up in today's meeting, I had previously sent you a website. It's called airdna.com. And
Go
if you
ahead.
put in Nahant, it comes up with quite a lot of information on the short-term rentals in Nahant. And this was the one that told me that we had 42 currently compared to the 17 that we had in February. They're at 83% occupancy right now. And they also are stating here that 95% of the rentals, so 95% of the 42 are entire home rentals.
That doesn't
So,
surprise me.
so it goes back to the question, and I'm confused as far as a non-owner occupied rental, if that is a secondary use of the property or an accessory use of the property.
Well, that obviously seems to be the crux of the debate we have in here tonight. My personal opinion is that it's not a primary, should not be a primary use. Obviously, we're not in agreement.
Right, and I think
So-
that you, I think
It-
that you've been
it-
really clear on that, Wayne. I thought I heard, and Dan, I don't know if you can chime in on this, but I thought I heard maybe something different when you spoke, but I mean, that's the crux of the matter right there, as far as non-owner occupied. And again, I'm only speaking to that because that's my personal experience that I'm dealing with. So it's the only point of reference that I have.
I guess Dan's not jumping in here, but
Okay,
No,
I
well,
mean,
Oh, here he is.
I think we can get past the whole accessory, what is not accessory use, if we, well, not if we, if the committee is focused on occupied versus non-occupied, I think that gets us around, is it accessory, is it not accessory? That's not to say that it cannot be accessory even if it's not owner occupied. But I think if we just use the terms that we have at our disposal in terms of the statutes, you know, we're going in the right direction. And that would be owner occupied versus non-owner occupied.
Dan, can you repeat that last statement? You were a little bit garbled.
That's okay. To summarize, we're getting caught up in what's accessory use, what's not accessory use. And I think what the words we should be, what the committee may be wanting using, occupied versus non-owner occupied. At the same time, those are the terms that are being given to us, being fed to us through the statute. So if we use tear on the grounds if we're challenged in the future.
Susan, can I ask you a question? Can you elaborate on why you're being prohibited of talking to the owner or what the issue is? I didn't attend the meeting at the planning board, so maybe if you can provide some details that might be helpful too. Thank you.
Yes, sure. There had been, first of all, when the property came on the market, we didn't know it was an Airbnb. We had never heard that from the owner. We subsequently found out about it. One time I filed a complaint with the owner by sending a message on Airbnb because that was the only way I had to get a hold of them. They subsequently were very responsive to some pretty bad issues that we had over here. But as of the last weekend, where they had a wedding gathering with a bus idling on the street for over 30 minutes and 15 to 20 wedding people running around. When I called them to complain, they said that they weren't taking any more of my complaints and that they were blocking my number, that they couldn't be responsible for irresponsible people renting their house. So
When was that? Sue?
that left me, no, the only other option, which I found out at the planning board, which I didn't even know was an option, which I have since pursued, was filing a complaint directly with Airbnb. Didn't know that was something that I could do, which I have since done. But it's just extremely frustrating when you can't, have any communication. And I think that speaks to the point that was brought up earlier about having someone in town that represents the property, whether that's a real estate agent or a property owner. But someone other than the police should be responsible for what goes on in that house. And right now, that's my only recourse, is to call the police.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's
And I-
unacceptable behavior,
I, I think Susan did a great presentation at the planning board. I think it shines a light on the fact that regardless of what someone's doing, you're gonna get lousy people. You're gonna get someone, that doesn't have any consideration for a neighbor and is gonna blow them off. If their license was at stake, maybe they would act differently, and
Yeah.
maybe they wouldn't. And, that would rectify this issue.
And if you had an agent in town, they could just go over there and,
But you'll
put
still
some
get-
order into the chaos.
We have rentals in town, 2 families, and some of them are kept beautiful and some of them are a catastrophe,
Yeah,
It's nothing to do with, well, that's a 2-family and that is too. Why is that one ugly? I think a lot of this boils down to the individual. And if we leave it up to the individual to govern it how they want,
that's right.
unfortunately, we're gonna have people ignored, blown off.
Yeah, that's just, I don't like that
Okay.
behavior.
Rob, we got another hand up there in the corner. I believe it's a Ava,
Ava Casilio?
I guess.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hello there.
As my mother was speaking about, from like a younger perspective, I guess you could say, is that a big issue that I'm noticing is like the negligence of these owners as well, because especially with the safety aspect, I've noticed that a lot of the people, even the owners themselves, are not really paying attention to the laws we do have in place when it comes to the speeding. And I've had actually multiple times people coming up to me who have kids and saying that they've almost gotten hit by people as well. So I think that in the regulations, as well as I have a friend whose parent works in the house for cleaning and things like that, is destruction of property and lack of care towards the property of the neighbors. Because I've had trash outside the house, I've had noise complaints, as well as complaints towards the neighbors and how they're treated as well. So I want to mention that myself, that's become a major issue for not only myself, but as the Airbnb its owners.
Okay, thank you, Ava. All right, so. Let's. I don't think we're gonna get much more accomplished here tonight, so let's. Take, what do we got, 2 weeks from today?
Or whatever the second,
When are we set to expire?
We're not.
Not,
Well,
Tuesday.
we need to.
When we sit down and agree on something, that's when we're gonna
then
go up.
been reading about other committees that have been going for 2 years and up.
So 2 weeks from now will be the 11th of October. That sound okay?
Sounds good.
I might be on duty, so I might be remote.
That's okay. As long as we have your presence in some description. Yes? No?
That works.
Works?
11th. Yep.
Okay. So let's do that.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a
It's,
question?
Sure, go ahead.
I thought we did make some progress today in that I think the board was leaning in direction without taking a vote that a change will need to be made to the table of uses. Is that right?
I think we need to add to the table of uses.
Okay, yeah, so there is some progress being made. That's a big decision to make, and that was one of you guys. You guys should probably vote on it to solidify it, to make sure it's there. So it's
Absolutely.
at the staple and then move forward. I assume we have a quorum tonight. So that would be good to move forward.
We'll take that up at the next meeting.
Okay,
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor.
good night, everyone.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, everyone on the screen.
Thanks, guys. So I'll just make a note to remind myself, next meeting, vote to add. We just.
All right.